Hi, everyone. Welcome to this. This is the Way podcast, the show that brings you the latest insights in trend from the world of talent acquisition, management, and professional development. The podcast is presented by Way Company, and I'm Leo Popov, your host. Today, we're joined by Jeremy Lyons. Jeremy is a Los Angeles based recruitment operations expert and co founder of RecOps Collective. He has significantly enhanced recruiting operations at companies like Verizon Media and Signal Sciences. He mentoring over 50 professionals and driving data-driven improvements in talent acquisition. Hi, Jeremy. Did I get it right?
Yeah, you did, Leo. Thank you so much.
Okay, cool. Yeah, today we will cover very important topics. We will go over coordinating interviews, stakeholder management, and continuous learning and development. Obviously, very important topics.
Yeah.
Jeremy, can you describe some of the latest tools and technologies that you find useful for coordinating interviews today?
Yeah. So, Leo, when I first started in TA, recruiting coordination was the recruiter came to the coordinator and said, "Hey, I need to get Leo scheduled. Send Leo an email, get his availability, go and look at calendars, and basically put something on the calendar. Here are a few templates, and then send the confirmation emails. A lot of manual steps. And the
Yeah.
recent, I would say, maybe 3 to 5 years, we started to see more automated scheduling tools come up. When I first started hearing about them, it was companies like Prelude, which is sadly going to be closing in 2025. But they really sort of had kicked off a whole automated scheduling aspect of things to make the coordinators' lives easier. And so now we've got a number of really great tools that have kind of taken what they originally started and have
Is
built
it
onto it.
is it something like Calendly? Like I use Calendly. Like are there any tools, or it is
Yeah.
just
So, I mean, when you think about recruiting tools, usually most recruiting tools end up being tools that have been in other places. And then somebody looked at it and went, hey, this looks like something that recruiting could use.
uh-huh.
And it sounds like something recruiting could use. Why don't we make a version of it for recruiting to use? And Calendly had actually bought Prelude. So there's a connection there.
Hmm.
But now what we're starting to see as recruiting has become more sophisticated is um, kind of a drive from the candidate side and a drive from the internal side. On the internal side, people have started to say, well, we want to do more shadow interviewing. We want to do more candidate experience pieces. And a large portion of the candidate experience is really within the scheduling. And so tools like Modern Loop, Candidate.fyi, Good Time have started to put more technology into kind of the newer spaces of creating more of a candidate experience. Um, Candidate.fyi has created kind of a whole portal so that now you can put information in there for candidates to stay involved. So it's not just sort of this, hey, I got sent the calendar thing. Now I'm waiting to be scheduled. Now I'm sort of just sitting there waiting with something to do.
Uh-huh.
Now you can put in more information that's centralized. You can do all those scheduling pieces. Now on the internal side, there's been more development with those shadow interviews. You want to be able to say like, hey, Jeremy's new to Way.
Hmm.
Leo, you want to make sure I'm not going to go totally rogue on an interview and ask a whole bunch of weird questions. So you want me to follow you around to a couple of interviews. Now these tools are making it much easier to do because that's normally been maintained in a spreadsheet. So as these things have been improving, and I mean, now those tools will also kind of take into account different time zones. So you're not worried about, when I
Uh-huh.
put this thing on this calendar, did I
Correct.
put it
And
in PST? Did I put it in
yeah,
Mountain? Like where did it go? And that used to be a really
nowadays
big deal.
when there is a lot of remote jobs, like it is important. You like talking with people, and even not even within US. Like you talk with people internationally. You hiring internationally.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Yeah, it's become a much bigger thing. And I remember knowing most time zones from where I was just simply because I'd be scheduling interviews in Europe, I'd be scheduling interviews in Japan, I'd be scheduling interviews in Mexico, and you're sitting there going, why do you have 10 different clocks going in your head? It's just the evolution of it, and people want more efficiency, people want to be involved in different kinds of ways, and many of these scheduling tools are allowing people to now not so much focus on just getting the schedule out, but really like using that energy and that time to build relationships with the candidates. And that's exciting to see.
Yeah, that's a very good development and saves a lot of time. And but I assume there is still a lot of challenges there. Like, what are the main interview challenges that you see nowadays?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest interview challenges that I see right now, and it's kind of this, it's been a shift that people have been talking about for a while now, is well, what happens if you want a candidate to just be able to build their own interview panel, basically? And that's kind of building on the idea, especially that's been one of the trends for 2024, that recruiting teams are going to have to do more with less. And
Yeah.
so, where are really easy places where you can automate stuff, especially if you have the information up front? And one of the easy places to do that would be, okay, well, how do we make scheduling happen easier? And a lot of tools, a lot of ATSs out there right now um, can sometimes have issues with candidates sort of picking the times and then cross reference on the other side, cross referencing who the interviewers are and making that schedule work with the schedule that the candidate has sort of said, this is when I want to have my interviews.
Hmm.
Um, so I think that that's the system side that's a struggle right now. And then I think too, and I tell people this all the time when it comes to a candidate, um, recruiting has built this house,
Yeah.
and we are in this house and we live in this house. Interviewers, hiring managers, candidates, applicants, they're all guests in the house. So their reaction to certain things are very different than like us, where we sort of like know where we put the blender. There's a little bit more anxiety around that. And so a lot of the times you have to do a little bit more hand holding for people to
Hmm.
sort of make sure that people feel very, very comfortable. So there's still the human element of scheduling and everything like that that is important for people to maintain and recognize. And that changes significantly when you start talking about different cultures and you start talking about different groups
Yeah.
of people, because they've each had different experiences and that's been passed down in communities.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I remember I was experimenting when hiring for my company with video interviewing software. Like, what is your opinion about video interview where like asynchronous when people can write video applications?
Oh, so you're kind of talking about what happens when you sort of you record your answers to your questions so that somebody can review it
Correct.
later.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's something that I've been hearing a lot more about. There's a tool out there that was talking about, well, we made our entire interview process asynchronous.
Yeah.
I personally don't think that that technology is there yet. I think that there's certainly, you can certainly record yourself giving an answer to something, and that can be fine. At this point in time, most of the world has spent a significant amount of time recording basically like this
Yeah.
on video chats, even before COVID. So there's a familiarity with screens and videos and all that. And then everybody just has to make sure you're looking at the camera and not into the
Yeah.
little box at yourself trying to do this, and it doesn't
Hmm.
become performative. But I think that one of the things that is difficult to do with that in an interview setting, and I'm not saying it's not going to get there, is that when you go to work, it's not just so much going to work, collecting a paycheck, and going home. You're going to work because you want to either work on the product that's there because you have a connection to it, or you want to work with the people because the people are bright and you know that you can learn something. And this feeds into sort of that continuous learning and development. I think that if people sort of feel like it hasn't been a human process from the beginning,
Uh-huh.
they're going to feel like it hasn't been a human process through the entire thing. And that's that first impression. Do I think we'll get to a point where the very first interview or some of the interviews will be recorded? Yeah, I mean, we're getting there. You have companies like Bright Hire, you have MetaView, you have things that are transcribing the interview, giving an analysis of that, and really making sure people are held accountable to their answers, and that's fantastic. Um, but I do still think that there's a human element there, as long as people are doing the work, that you're going to need to be able
Yeah.
to have a conversation with somebody at some
Uh,
point in the interview process.
and I also feel that there will be shift in perception, similar as like during the COVID, everyone become like very comfortable with video conferences. Before, it wasn't a thing, and I think with like using more technology, more automation in these processes as well, like it is coming there, and I'm excited to see how it will, where the balance will stop
Yeah.
between them. Yeah,
Well, and I think it also just depends on the people. That's the thing that's really been interesting, is that, like, for me personally, I work remote, but I love getting to meet my coworkers. There's just a relationship there that for me is really, really important. Like,
correct.
people working with me can be an adventure, and I say that because I like to crack jokes. I like to use more of my body so that people can understand, like, when something's a joke versus when I'm being serious
Yeah,
or anything like that. And sometimes it's just as easy to, like, cross hear information. I'm one of those people that really thrives on being in a place where I can hear everything that's going on. I can interpret everything that's going on, as opposed to having very direct conversations with somebody that is, on a video, and that's a very direct sort of thing.
correct.
Not every team works like that. There are some people who are like, all I need to know is, like, shoot me an email in the morning about what you need done at the end of the day, and do not talk to me for the rest of it. And that's okay. We just can't be forcing people into very specific
Correct.
boxes. And I think we're going to hit a point actually in interviewing, and I've said this for years now, where the candidate is basically going to have a choose your own adventure, where they can say, like, look, actually, maybe they're neurodivergent and talking with people is really, really difficult. And the role they have is not going to be something where they're going to have to talk to a lot of people. They could say, give me all of the interview
Hmm.
pieces up front. I'm going to do them. And they're going to have a no touch kind of interview.
Yeah, I like that idea that there are different people with different personalities. For
Yeah.
someone, this is might be the best case. For another one, I want to talk personally. And
Exactly.
Jeremy, you mentioned that there are many stakeholders involved in typical interview process.
Yeah.
And how do you manage stakeholders? How to organize everything?
I mean, every stakeholder has to be managed differently. So when we talk about stakeholders, when it comes to, uh, let's talk about it, because we were just talking about interviewing. You talk about stakeholders there. You have especially as a recruiting coordinator or on the rec ops side, you have your recruiter, you have your hiring manager, you have the interviewers, you have the candidates. And then if you even wanted to go kind of wild on it, you could call the tools a stakeholder too, because you have to manage the tools and how the tools are interacting with one another as well. So for your
Yeah,
recruiters, normally they want to know sort of the, like, hey, when has the candidate been touched with? Like, when did you reach out to the candidate? How did you get everything scheduled? What does that look like? When you start talking to the hiring managers, they want to know, the data, like, how many interviews did we have this week? Where are we at with people in the funnel? Where are we at with the top of the funnel? Those kinds of questions. Um, for the interviewers, it's the, hey, you got me scheduled for 6 interviews this week, and like each interview
Uh,
is going to take me an hour. I'm about to lose 6 hours of business time. And that's not even accounting for what I usually like to say, which is the 30 minutes before the interview when somebody is now worried about missing the interview. So they're not working at their peak productivity. And then the 30 minutes after the interview. So now you've just taken 12 hours out for each interview effectively on
yeah,
them. And then you have the candidates who are, going, hey, I gave you my availability 5 minutes ago. Why have I not seen the confirmation? And there's different pieces, and there's different cares and different avenues. And so a lot of on the rec ops side, and I say this to everybody, it's like the biggest thing that you can do is learn how to manage the most combustible element on the planet, and that is human emotion.
yeah,
And it's not only other people's emotion, it's your own emotion. Because there are times where people are going
right.
to come at you and say, you messed this up. And you're like, you sent me an email 5 minutes ago telling me to lay this out, and I had already done the thing that you wanted me to do.
Mhm.
Like,
Correct.
it's all about kind of how are you balancing those human elements when you do anything to do the things that you need to do. And then obviously the stakeholder management on the tools side, you're constantly doing tool maintenance on the rec ops side. You're coming up with new
Mm.
processes to make sure that things flow better, that have better data. You're talking to that company's your CSM and making tool recommendations to fit things that other people are going to need. Um, and I think that's why it's one of those things where whenever you're going to use a tool or get a tool, adopt it, one of the biggest conversations you have is how can I give feedback and what's your release cycle?
Mhm.
Because the worst thing could be when you're sitting there going, hey, I need this thing. And companies are like, yeah, that's Q4 2026. You're like,
Yeah,
you know, what am I going to do?
correct. Are there like any tools exist for stakeholders management? Like what tools or software you use for that, or it is old school approach?
Well, I think that there's certainly a lot of people have been repurposing project management tools like your Asanas, your
Hmm.
Mondays, tools like Smartsheet, tools like that. But I think that also, you don't necessarily need to go out and get one of those tools if people understand at the base the tools that you're using, and giving people the education around the tools that you're using. Like your ATS can very easily be a stakeholder management tool. It's just sometimes people don't know that's where to go, and people don't want to admit that they don't understand. And so you have to kind of continue to do
Yeah.
that education piece along the way so people understand where to go.
Okay. Cool. Cool. Yeah. Let's cover also the learning and development parts. This
Yeah.
is like very obviously very important. And is there anything new that appeared on the market recently? Anything that you tried and especially like for this?
Yeah, so I think there are two out there that I immediately come to mind when people have started to talk to me about like learning and development and learning management tools. So I think, especially in the TA space, two that I'm looking at are Poetry, which
Hmm.
is a recruiter enablement platform, and Purple, Purpl.
Hmm.
Um, Poetry is really great because for the longest time in recruiting and TA, we've had folders upon folders with documents in them. And when people have left or people are new or things have happened, there's never been a centralized place for us to like go and find that information. And also it's become, maybe you have something that's buried in one doc and things like that that you need for another thing, and it becomes more difficult. And I've really liked how Poetry has sort of taken all of that into an idea and said, let's just build a platform where you store everything,
Yeah.
where and that I think is really really helpful. And I know people will say, well, couldn't you organize your Google Docs and or your OneDrive like that, or build a Notion page or something? You could, but ultimately, I think that there are still limitations to that. And I just like the what poetry is building and how they're building it. Purple, on the other hand, while it's not that enablement platform where you're going to store all of your documents like poetry is, the what Purple does is there's a lot of like webinars that they've built out, and they built out a webinar library so you can go and you can learn.
Uh-huh.
Um, and that I think is really, really helpful because it's not sort of the stuffy kind of learning. It's the stuff that people are actually doing on the ground um, by the people who are actually doing it. And I think that they've built a really, really good collection of people to talk and build information for.
Yeah, that's. I also like these tools when you can build your like learning materials and tools available right away for your team.
Yeah.
And like looking ahead, what do you think? What trends will be dominating in these fields, like that we mentioned, like in recruiting in general, and in fields that we discussed? Are there maybe specific technologies or methodologies we should be paying attention to?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's impossible right now to not say AI. As a trend that is going to continue to dominate in the next 5 years. It's impossible to say it because there are so many companies that are building AI tools or building AI elements into things. I think one of the continued trends that is going to kind of pop up out of that is what are the best prompts, because each tool is probably going
Right.
to respond to prompts very differently. I think that it's also going to be where is the LLM for this tool coming from?
Yeah.
Because I think one of the things that we've noticed or started to notice is bias in AI,
Yeah. Yeah.
which for everybody, it makes sense that AI would be biased because if you're training it on, let's call it the wealth sum
People.
of human
Yeah.
knowledge,
Yeah.
that's inherently biased. And so certain
Correct.
groups are getting, and we've seen it with AI do that. And I think the other thing too will be um, how do you use data to tell a story? I think when you start, one of the bigger things that has been built into most of these tools is data, and people want to see or understand what's their performance. How do these tools make them better? And I would love to kind of see, especially when it comes to sourcing tools or things like that, people really starting to build in, unconscious bias pieces so that somebody could say, like, at the end of a session where a recruiter is going through and reviewing resumes, there's something that could pop up and sort of say, like, you went through 100 resumes, you rejected 75 of them. Within that 75, the common thread that could have shown up was you rejected everybody from this particular university that got this particular degree and had worked for this particular company. Why? And I think that
Yeah.
prompting of the why question is going to be very, very crucial in the next 5 years about why are we using this tool? Why is this the technology we're choosing to use? And why are we building it this way? Because without the why, we're just going to end up having a whole bunch of stuff everywhere and no real clear vision on how to use it. And I think that will also kind of lean into recruitings being very, very, very like focused on the like we have this specific tool for doing a lot more than just this one little specific thing, unless the one specific thing is like this tool closes candidates and has 100% success rate for us. That might be useful to some companies, but to others it might be a luxury, and we need to move
Yeah, and
away.
probably there will be technology that will identify biases as well, because now there is AI that identify like whether this text or video was generated with the help of AI, and
Yeah.
I think there will be technology like helping people to see the biases and make better decisions. I believe in technology will play a pivotal role in recruitment and in many industries, obviously. So I believe that the future is like more hybrid when co-pilots will significantly improve our productivity and like for any professionals. And this is what we do at Way. So we're creating this Way virtual recruiter that pretty much automates all most time consuming manual tasks such as like sourcing candidate based on detailed skill profile, crafting personalized messages to increase engagement, and managing the communication and screening for candidates end to end. So we believe that as a result, recruiters will be able to focus their time on meaningful conversations with top candidates, and they don't need to spend time on like manual stuff. So that will be a very big help. And before we wrap up, any final thoughts or advice for our listeners, Jeremy?
Yeah. Kind of just thinking about what you just said too. I think one of the things that I will say is that process informs outcomes. And so the thing that I would say to people to leave it to is, you know, think about what your process is. Think about if you would want to go through that process
Yeah,
yourself.
yeah,
Um, and think about the whys behind each thing and take that back to like first principles. Um, and it might seem like a tedious task to do, but you'll start to see where there are holes in in things that are causing other problems, and will cause other problems down the line so that you can strategically think about how to solve those. And I think that's where having your rec ops team enabled and supported really can help a recruiting team be successful with what they are trying to do. So that I would leave people with that sort of takeaway is definitely look at your process and be very thoughtful about all the why questions you ask down that road.
that is amazing advice. And thank you, Jeremy, for sharing your valuable insights with us today. And thank you to listeners for tuning in. So we'll put in comments all the useful tools that were mentioned during the conversation, and as well as a link to profile to Jeremy's profile, if you don't mind. So maybe somebody would like to ask more questions or share something. Please reach out. And don't forget to subscribe to This is the Way podcast for more discussions about new tools and best practices in hiring, management, and professional development. Also, submit your comments about topics you would like us to cover. And see you in the next episode. Thanks,
Yeah.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone.